Good afternoon and welcome to the San Mateo Arboretum Society's Zoom seminar, Quick Introduction to Ikebana Design. The program will last approximately 90 minutes. It may go a little bit longer than that, just depending. And it will be recorded, so you can look at it at home on your computer. My name is Pat Paquette. I'm a greenhouse volunteer and I'm on the education committee. Feel free to, for those viewing on Zoom, use your chat button down at the bottom of the screen. And obviously for the people who are here in person, you can just raise your hand. Nancy asks that we hold questions till the end so she can get through her presentation. A few days after the presentation, you'll be emailed a link with the recording of the presentation. And before we start, just a little bit of information about what's going on at the Arboretum. Our nursery is open from 12 to 3 on Saturday and Sunday, and we have winter hours now. So we changed from 11 to 2 to 12 to 3. Entry is at the north gate, and we accept credit, debit, and Apple Pay. No, we don't take cash at this point. And while you're in the park, be sure to check out our butterfly hummingbird garden, or the rose garden, which Sue Carter, who's also an education committee member, is in charge of. And we have 2 demonstration gardens, a sun garden and a shade garden. So be sure to check those out. Today's workshop presenter is Nancy Locke. Nancy has more than 30 years of experience in Ikebana, and she has an advanced teaching certificate in Ikebana, giving her a strong background in contemporary design theory and technique. She holds the Somu rank, is that pronounced correctly, in Sogetsu School of Ikebana, combining her expertise in Ikebana design with her enjoyment of horticulture and gardening. She inspires her students to create beautiful, fresh arrangements and to see floral materials with fresh eyes. In fact, I took a class from Nancy about probably 20 years ago now, and I still use some of the basic principles of Ikebana that I learned from Nancy. So I will now turn it over to Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome to all of you. Let me start by asking who here has already studied Ikebana? 1, 2, 3. So for the people watching on Zoom, there's 14 or 15 people here. We had 3 hands come up so that they know. Today, the objective of this class is just to give you a quick understanding of Ikebana, the art of Ikebana. Like any art, it's an endless study. Even those of us who are ranked teachers still are studying. We're actually required to continue studying. What I'm not going to cover in this class today is the long 600-year history of Ikebana. We're not going to talk about the symbolism of plant materials. We're not going to talk about complex structural techniques to support weighty materials. We're not going to talk about manipulating and altering and drawing and painting materials for abstract designs. All of those are worth a class or a course in and of themselves. So this is just a quickie in and out for you. I hope you've come away with a general idea of what a real beginning Ikebana design would look like. You can replicate it maybe at home or use it when you're doing other types of flower arranging. We will, at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about vocabulary. There are a few basic Japanese words that are part of the Ikebana study that everybody needs to know, and they learn them right in their very first class usually. Please do hold off on your questions. I'm going to love to hear your questions, but I'd like to do it at the end. Okay, thank you so much for that. Let's go to the slide, Kevin, that says design attributes. where I'd like to start is talking about some of the attributes, the creative aesthetic attributes of an Ikebana design and how it's different from Western. When I say Western, I mean floral design that pretty much came out of the European tradition. Some of the key differences are that a finished Ikebana arrangement will be asymmetrical, meaning the left side and the right side are different, but yet the thing has to be in balance. It can't look as though it's going to tip over. It is very much predicated on the combination, the harmonious combination of line and mass. Western designs tend to be primarily mass arrangements. Another key difference is that its form is that of a triangle as opposed to a sphere. So we have a triangle. I'm going to talk more about that. The floral component of a design, which is that's not the vase, is in perfect proportions to the container itself. This is one of the highest level masteries of Ikebana, that type of floral design influenced Western floral design as well, in terms of having proportional harmony between the mass of the container and what you've put in it. Typically, but not always, an Ikebana design has a front and a back, largely due to them having developed in Japanese homes and being placed in an alcove for display, but also because they were displayed on the Buddhist altar, so they were back against a wall. Notice I said typically, but not always. Like every art, there are always exceptions. And another key difference for Ikebana from Western design is the simplicity and typically minimal use of materials. Less is more. In a Western design, more is more. That's kind of the goal, is to really pack it in so that it feels very effusive. An Ikebana arrangement, by contrast, will feel more contemplative. Sometimes we're told when we're learning and we say, well, how do I know if I've got enough material in? How do I know if I'm done? The answer is from the headmaster, when you have nothing left to take out. Subtraction down to the essence of what's needed for a good design. Okay, so let's go now to our photo slides. I'm going to show you slides of 3 different arrangements that are in what's called the basic upright style. This is what you would learn in a first class. This design is made with pepper. This is a branch. It's got peppers on it. Can everybody see that? And it's combined with chrysanthemums and then what did I use there? Those leaves. I don't know if they're aspidistra or exact. Oh, yeah, they're from a ginger. I did these for a workshop that I taught at Volcano National Park in the Hawaii Island. So all the materials came from my garden or from my neighbors' gardens. And Ikebanas are always pilfering from neighbors. Can we take a look at the next slide? We'll go back through these a little bit later. This is the same pattern, but it's been executed instead of with a branch material. I designed this one with agapanthus. Everybody recognizes that, right? Next slide. Again, it's the very same pattern. You see how different it can look when you vary the materials. This is fan palm. And I think those are carnations, yes. We don't get a lot of carnation in Hawaii, but Maui grows carnations, so they get imported to us. Now, this arrangement is in a ceramic compote, but it's a shallow container, water-wise, shallow, on a pedestal. Can we go backwards through these, Kevin? Might run you through your paces. Here, this particular arrangement is in a glass, a translucent glass container, and then that second one again. This one is in a basket. Baskets don't hold water, so there's another container inside it. But what I'm trying to show you is that all kinds of things can be used as the container. Now can we take a look, Kevin, at the slides that I marked up? Here you can see the triangular formation that I mentioned. The tallest point is the longest stem, the next highest is a medium stem, and the lowest is the short stem. So you have a design that's comprised of three main stems, a long, medium, and a short, and they're arranged to create an asymmetrical triangle. You also have line and mass. The branches themselves make a line. Line can be straight, it can be curvy, it can be bent and angled, it can be all kinds of line, but it is line because it's not encroached upon by other materials. It's left standing, it has space around it. And then the mass, which is created in this design by the chrysanthemums and the foliage at the base. Let's look at one of the other slides that I marked up. Here's the agapanthus again and again. Can you see that triangular, the long, medium, and short? And the line in this is very much accentuated, the stem of the agapanthus, and the very characteristic curvy one, which I liked a lot. So we have a straight line and a curvy line, but nevertheless line, and mass at the base. And then the other slide. This is with fan palm that got trimmed off, make them a little bit smaller. What I want you to see here, which was also present in the others, is the asymmetry. Notice left and right side of the design are different, very different from a Western design, which usually all the materials are evenly distributed. So it's very much a beauty that's predicated on symmetry. This is a beauty predicated on asymmetry. I'd like to take a moment to show you that fundamental structure comprised of the long, medium, and short stem. I'm going to use as placeholders for floral materials these three bamboo sticks. We sometimes design with bamboo, they're very beautiful, but these are just some dried ones to show you what we do. Can you see that I have a long, medium, and a short stem? And this is typically the proportion that we use in Sogetsu Ikebana. This one is about 3/4 the height of the long one, and the next one's about 3/4 approximately of the others. And when they're inserted into a pin frog, they will be inserted not like this, not like a fence post, of course, that has no 3 dimension. If we were placing floral materials in to create a basic upright arrangement, which you will see later today, they would be placed into the pin frog something like this. Long, medium, short. If you see it from the side, you can see that there's quite a bit of depth from this point to this. Yes? Okay. So now I'm going to translate that to some materials. When we say upright, we mean that finished composition has a feeling of being upright. It does not mean that a stem is standing absolutely straight up. So the materials that I'm going to use are branch and then some florals. Anybody know what it is? We're laughing because we here at the Arboretum weren't sure ourselves, and we spent an hour before you got here deciding that it is crepe myrtle. Isn't it gorgeous? Fall, a wonderful time for doing floral design. One of the things that you learn in Ikebana is how to cut your line out of a stem like this. You can see there's a lot going on here, and it's way more than you need for my design. This will be the long stem. This container that I'm using is ceramic, and we call it a Moribana container. Materials are not going to stand up in it without some help, and so this is where the pin frog comes into play. I'm working from the back of this design, not that that's the way we would do it normally, but I'm doing it from the back so that you can see the design as it's being created. If you were doing this, you would be sitting right here, looking at your materials, putting them in. This is the second stem that I'm cutting. That's about 3/4 approximately the length of the other one. And I'll tilt it down to about 45 degrees. Can you hand me those flowers at this point? The third leg of my three-dimensional form is going to be a flower. It's this our typical way of doing Ikebana. This is chrysanthemum, another material that's a fall material. So we're combining fall materials with fall materials. Heavy-handed there. So I have a long, medium, short, and I have a triangle. I have asymmetry. Line material, there's no mass. So that comes next. There's two interlocked triangles. This is one. Yes, can everybody see that? Long, medium, and short. But this short stem, this flower, also is a triangle with these. So they're interlocked, if you will. And I'm going to need
Are you done with all this?
No, I'm going to add quite a bit more because we need to create some density at the base. And then the last thing I'll do, Pat, is put in that miscanthus. Turn that around so you can see it in progress. You can see the creation, development of the mass at the base. Now I'll use some of that miscanthus to finish this off. There's quite a bit of mass now at the base, so that helps emphasize the line. This is, anybody know what it is? Miscanthus. It's a form of a grass material, as you can tell by its character. They start out like this, and then they open a little more, and then they become fully open, and then they become dry and fluffy and throw their seeds all over the place. By the way, the Japanese word for this, which I said we wouldn't talk about that, but it's fun because it's Suzuki. It's a fall material. The miscanthus fronds sprays don't bloom until this time of year. And the Japanese associate it with summer and fall. So I have fall materials and fall materials. I have different colors in the design, and I have now a material like this, which gives a feeling of movement to the design. It's so different in its characteristic. So this is what your basic Ikebana design would look like in your first class, working with branch materials and flowers, creating a three-dimensional basic upright with a long, medium, and a short stem where you trim enough to show the line and the character, emphasize it with mass. Yes? Okay, let's go ahead and move this one, and then I'm going to go over to the whiteboard. I want to do a schematic for you. The basic upright form as materials placed into the pin frog in certain angles to create that composition that feels upright in general and has 3 dimensions. This is that round container. And into the round container inside we have a pin frog. Notice the pin frog is asymmetrically placed. That's so as we do our design, it will be asymmetrically placed in the vessel itself. Think about, remember that device we all had in school? It was called a compass and it was shaped like this and it had degrees on it. Do you remember those? Yeah. Okay, well, think about it here. Straight up above the container is 0. Straight out to the side, of course, would be 90, right? And then you'd have 180 and 90 around, right? And of course, midway in between, we'd have, yes, 45 degrees. 45 degrees. Now, if we were doing a Western design, we'd use this as a centering point and we'd sort of build all the way around it. But we do it differently in Ikebana. Our long stem is going to be at about the tip of it, about 15 degrees off of 0. And so that second stem is out here at 45 degrees. Now we have to balance all the weights on one side so far. So our short stem is out here at about 60 to 75 degree angle. Is quite low. The additional materials will be in here to create density, and there'll be a few things at the base to help conceal the view of the pin frog. Yes? Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. All right. How am I doing on time? I'm way ahead of time. So let's move away from basic, which you don't do for a long, long time. You may say, how long does it take to learn Ikebana? Well, it's an endless study, as I said, but the designs are practiced in a class over and over and over using different materials. There is all kinds of variations on the upright pattern. There are slanting patterns where the long stem, instead of being upright, is at a slant. There are cascading patterns where the stem goes out over the edge of the container. And then there are all those designs created in tall bases as well, with no pin frog and all kinds of construction going on to hold the weight. So a student learns the patterns over and over and learns the variations over and over using different materials for 40, 50, 60 lessons until it's automatic, that the proportions and the lengths and the techniques of cutting and inserting stems has just become second nature to them. Then they move on to personal expression. But like any art form, if you want to play bizarre jazz, you usually have a background, yes, in classical music first. So you understand music before you know how to make it weird and strange and abstract and expressive of yourself. The Sogetsu school of Ikebana believes that the designer should have their own expression in their arrangements. That said, every student starts with a very strong background in all of the basics so that they have a foundation on which to build their house, so it's not a house of cards. Yes? Okay. Now I want to just start with explaining what I'm doing here. So these are not Moribana containers. You know what they are. Yes, these are gourds. And to have water in here to hold materials, and a pin frog, you have to have something. So in this case, I have a nice little Japanese made ceramic container, little tiny one with a kenzan in it. And in this case, it's cat food can with a pin frog. Inside the gourd. So then I can add water to them without ruining my gourd. So what I'm going to do is not a basic pattern at all. It will be what we call freestyle, which is what somebody achieves at some point, freestyle. And I'm going to use two containers together so that the two arrangements become one arrangement. At least that's my plan. Pat, let's have what's in there. You can just take it all out and put it right here. But the dried gourds to me also evoke fall, end of the growing season, yes? So to have a nice feeling, I wanted to put in materials that feel like fall. So my choices here are Andina. Everybody knows the heavenly bamboo. Yes, everybody knows this material. But it looks like this in the fall with these nice colors on it. So this is fall. This is Japanese anemone after all the petals have come off. Can you see it? I'll hold it up here. And the little green balls, I think, are very cute. And they also have a feeling of delicacy and motion. This material is called Craspedia. It's a summer material. Does anybody grow this? No? Craspedia grows fairly easily. And then it will dry. It'll turn a darker brown, but it'll last forever. And when they're fully dry, if you don't like the brown color, you can spray paint them. Use them for something else, and you don't have to put them in water. This material is, you all recognize this one? Veronica, yes? And of course, we know what this one is. Chrysanthemums, another fall material. With the exception of the chrysanthemums, everything that I've chosen here to go in the gourds is very delicate materials. Because I want to give that feeling of end of autumn, the dry grass, seeds that are getting dry and the wind is going to blow them away. So we want something that has some expression to it. Oh, now we have to use this one, right? That's lots more fun than these. turn that around for a minute so you can see where we're going with this. Not finished, but you can see where we're going with this. Lots of delicate materials in now. But to provide some contrast to all the delicate materials, we need something with a little punch and a little difference in scale. This is a little bit like being a dentist. And I can't see inside, so I'm doing a lot of it by feel. When we do a design with a container that has a lot of its own design, has the little tendril, it has a very distinctive shape of the mouth. So I don't put in materials to the point where the shape of the mouth is concealed. We want to see this. This negative space is part of the design. Just like in the other arrangement I did, this is negative space. And this is very important in an asymmetrical design, but it's very important in the Japanese aesthetic and the use of, we say negative space, empty space, if you will. It's empty, but it can't just be empty space for the sake of creating empty space. It has to be designed. It has to be a beautiful space. Should be a beautiful space. One little tiny bit of the Veronica. But a companion design here. And then the two of them will be composed to sit together. So this is our husband and wife, but to help them feel like they are belonging together, put them on a mat. Pat, can you help me with this? Just move the mat forward closer to folks here so they can see. Thank you. Sure. With these two designs, you can see this one has sort of an upright feeling, and this one has more of a slanting feeling. These are freestyle, but even when we do a freestyle design, we're considering our proportions, we're considering our angles, we're considering line and mass. And as we go into more abstract designs, we may eliminate some stems. This design does have a long, a medium, and kind of a short, but this one doesn't. This has a medium and a short only. That design has had the stem removed. Of course, it doesn't look like this. These are brought together. And that's part of what you learn in an Ikebana class. Once you've got all your basic patterns, then you start screwing them up by doing them with 2 stems instead of 3. But you have to very carefully know what you're doing when you start messing around with them like that, right? We can eliminate in a design the long stem. We can eliminate in a design and have just a medium and a short, or we can leave a long stem, eliminate the medium, and leave the short. The short one is never taken away, but these two can be alternatively taken away to accommodate different containers in shorter styles. Yeah, so I am way ahead of schedule, so we can have lots and lots of Q&A, but I do want to go over vocabulary first. There's some of this stuff. Kevin, can we go to that vocabulary slide? Just put that on there. I need this one. Thank you. Here's just 5 terms that are very, very essential to the study of Ikebana. The first one is Ike. You can see that that's one of the phonemes in Ikebana. Bana means flower. Ike means, if you see the kanji character written, you would translate it as live or living, or even as life spirit. In Chinese, it's similar to the concept of qi, if any of you understand qi. So the word, the phoneme Ika combined with Bana means live or living flowers, the living spirit of flowers. You may have noticed that I was cutting the materials underwater in a low water bowl, and this is to help preserve their life. As Ikebanas, we're very, very concerned about the fact that we cut something that was living. So essentially we ended its life, right? Because we cut it off the plant. So out of great respect for it, it's very important that we give it every chance it can have to stay as fresh and lively as possible. So the stems are cut underwater. We change the water in the containers every day. We do not add chemicals. We change the water every day. That's the difference. Chemicals are if you're not going to change the water every day. And sometimes you can't, depending on where it's displayed or what it is. The next third word is mori bana. You notice that's 2 phonemes also. There again is the bana, which is flower. So that gives you a clue that the word means something about flowers. Mori means, the kanji character translates as piled up or stacked up, or a better way, I think, for us Westerners to think of it is elevations. So flowers at different elevations. And that's sort of what we have with the Moribana design, the one that I finished earlier, where we have a high stem, a medium stem, and a lower stem. So we have elevations in the design. Moribana also refers to the container itself. We refer to them as a Moribana container, and that's anything that's flat and shallow and has a big wide mouth. Hasami is this. It's your specialized scissor that we use for Ikebana. It's different from a pair of pruning shears or other types of clippers in that both of the beaks are a blade and they're extremely sharp. So that when they cut through a material, they give a very precise and clean cut. And that's necessary when it's time to insert a stem into a pin frog, that it's been cut very precisely, depending on what your material is and what angle you want it to sit at in the design. Kenzan is the Japanese word for pin frog. We call them pin frogs. They can be any number of shapes, rectangles or round. They usually come with these rubber bottoms, and those are for traction. You saw me pushing heavy stems down into the Kenzan, and it's important that the Kenzan isn't slipping all over in the container while you're trying to work. Yeah. Okay. Questions? Okay, several hands are up.
Yeah, I noticed that particularly the larger stems, you were cutting them at an angle and then
Yes.
you kind of.
Yes. So I'm going to repeat your question for the Zoom audience. She said she noticed that when I cut the stems, some of them, most of them, I was cutting them at an angle. And that's a very good observation. We cut stems that are hard, woody, in other words, at an angle. And that is so that we can slip that tapered end between the pins of the Kenzan and actually get it to seat all the way to the base and sustain itself in position when it's tilted. Soft materials, can I have one of those for sample marks, please? Soft materials, like this is soft, yeah. We cut these just straight across because they're eminently easy to stick into the pins and press them all the way to the base. So we divide the world botanically. The world of all growing things are divided into hard materials, or we call them branch materials, although technically they may not always be a branch, and soft materials, and the term in Ikebana is grass materials. So grass materials and branch materials, or hard materials and soft materials, two different ways of cutting them for proper retention in a pin frog.
Did you also cut it? You cut lengthwise, yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
okay. So repeating again for the Zoom audience, she references, not only did I cut the material on an angle, I also slid it up through the middle. That's not required for everything, but anything that is of a significant density and width, giving it a cut up the middle basically bifurcates it into two parts. So it reduces the resistance when I'm pressing the stem into the pin frog. Yes? Okay.
When you did your first arrangement and you did the grass, I was wondering whether you also applied the 75% relative height rule for the grass.
Want me to move this back up?
Yes. She's asking, the question is, did I apply the 75-degree angle
Oh,
to
it's actually 75% of the.
the
So the
length?
tallest grass
Yes.
is the medium one, probably 3/4.
Yes, it looks shorter because it's tilted down. If we were to hold them straight up to each other, you would see it's about 3/4. But then when it's tilted down, you see how the top of it becomes slower. Mhm. Is that your question?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Other questions? Yes and yes.
Is there some place locally where to buy the supplies?
Kevin, could you put up that final slide now at this point? I knew I would have this question. Buying supplies, Japanese-made supplies for Ikebana is sometimes a challenge. Where there are in commercial areas, stores that sell Japanese goods, such as in Japantown, you can find what you need. Here in San Mateo, it's pretty difficult. I recommend for these supplies, container, pens-on, the scissors, that you go online. You'll save yourself a lot of gas and frustration, and you can look at lots of choices online. This will be in what's online. You can see this afterwards, and I've suggested ways to search for them, the keywords, so that you'll get what you want. You can find these materials at, I would say, about the cost they might be retail, or in some cases less.
Can you always get inspiration by just going to the backyard? Or do people who do Ikebana tend to go to flower shops to get their raw materials?
The question is about sourcing materials for Ikebana. Do we always get them from our own gardens or yards, or do we go to retail or wholesale? The answer is all of the above. It's nice that you can get it from your own garden. It's really nice if you actually grew the material yourself, so that you will already have a feeling for its properties and you'll have a respect for it. There are some of the old classical Ikebana schools that say you have to have grown your own materials. Yeah. Retail, these came from Trader Joe's, so that's your answer. These are from Trader Joe's. There's your answer on that. And then for anybody who can purchase at the San Francisco Wholesale Flower Market, you have choices that are just dazzling because the materials are brought in from all around the world. But of course, you're buying in volume. Yes. And you have to be a member to shop there. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
There was
Similar, I mean, besides if you don't have the membership to the flower, are there any other places here in the Bay Area? So that you can buy kind of individual pieces, you know, or besides Trader Joe's? I mean,
I'm not quite sure I understand your question. You could maybe take it
yeah.
just for a
Are
moment.
there other places besides like in San Francisco that you can buy some of the materials? I just find it here, and I know at Trader Joe's, but you know, to get some of those branches there, and I don't know.
So for the Zoom audience, again, the question is, other than retail and your garden, what other sources might you have? Yes, was that your question? Any florist can get materials for you from the San Francisco Flower Market. So you can ask to have them ordered. Yeah, anything. You can look up something very unusual in your garden books and say, I want these. I know they come from Australia. They'll get them. I mean, they won't be inexpensive. But one of the nice things about learning Ikebana is, because you would be working over and over with different materials, it starts opening your eyes to what grows around you, things that have always been there, but you haven't really noticed them before. But you'll find yourself looking at things and going, I could probably use that in a design. It's very interesting looking. We also use in Ikebana materials that are not in their prime, which means they may still be in bud form, or they may be past their prime. They may have gone to seed, or maybe even it's a bare branch. So those things they're natural, they have a natural beauty. And we use them a lot in Ikebana. Plants don't have to be in their prime. In fact, to some Ikebanas, the materials are much more interesting if they're not perfect, not in their prime. A bud evokes future. So we often like to incorporate materials that are in bud in our designs. And things that are spent, that have gone to seed or have become bare, they also show a passage of time, which is very evocative. Yes, 2 questions.
Then we do have a couple of questions on the Zoom.
Is there anyone that you recommend to go for to take a class? Of course, we do that.
The question is, can I recommend someplace to take a class? What I would recommend to find an instructor is to go online to an organization like Ikebana International, which has a large San Francisco chapter. And in that chapter, there are highest level instructors from many different schools of Ikebana. So they will have a list on their website, and hopefully you can find somebody that's close. But you also, if you're seeking an instructor, I strongly recommend that you try to go to some flower shows, flower exhibitions, particularly the exhibitions that have designs created by designers from different schools. Take a look at them, see which ones seem to appeal to you, and you'll start finding that maybe the more modern ones appeal to you, or maybe the strictly classical ones appeal to you. And then from there, then narrow down your search for an instructor because you have a focus. Yeah. Also remember that when you study Ikebana, your teacher puts a great deal of time and energy into you. So I think it's the student's responsibility, A, to be serious when they get into it, and secondly, to have done that research first, so you kind of know that what that teacher teaches is what you're interested in. Because you could study for a while and go, I don't really like this. I want to do something that's really avant-garde and bizarre, so I need to go another direction. And that's not always fair to the instructor that spent a lot of time with you, although what you learned will be somewhat transferable. There are many different schools of Ikebana, but they have more in common than they have that differentiates them. At their fundamental level, they're very similar because they all came from the same root. Oh, you had a question.
Yeah, that was my question as well. And you said it was Ikebana International?
Yes, that's the name of it. And it is international. It has chapters all around the world. And the San Francisco chapter has always been a fairly robust one. COVID has not done it any favors, however.
Okay, I also want to interject, if you could fill out your evaluation forms that were on your chair, that's really helpful to us for future programs. And then before we take more from the audience, maybe we can do the Zoom. Kevin, could you read those or?
I'll read them.
Okay.
So I will come back to, somebody else had a hand up. But one of the questions is the placement of the pin frog within the container significant? For example, should it always be centered? Those are 2 questions. The first answer is yes. The placement of the kenzan or the pin frog in the container is very important. And the answer to the second question is it always in the center? You may remember when I did this schematic that I showed you that the pin frog is off to the side. So it is rarely in the center. It is always off to one side or the other, and it's in the front or the back, depending on what pattern we're doing. It has a number of positions. And then the other question is, I think, sort of one that was asked, do I offer classes? Where can we go to further the study of Ikebana? I offer classes in Hawaii, and you're all welcome. And I answered the other question. Go to Ikebana International to try to find instructors. Yes.
I'd love to, for you to talk about the proportion of the ceramic
Yes.
versus the arrangement. Like how to think about.
Oh, what is it? Yes. Well, it's a long lesson, but let me give it to you briefly. I think I can use this. Can everybody see this? So a container, no matter what its size, no matter what its shape, it has a mass. And we've determined the mass by knowing its width and its height, those 2 things, kind of a mathematical equation. That's its mass. And then we usually, for the long stem, we double it. Width plus height times 2, and that will be the length of the long stem. So this was width plus height plus 1.5, or sometimes 2. That can vary depending on the material. If it's a very heavy material, you might want to bring it down. If it's spindly, it might want to be taller. So the height of the long stem is predicated on the mass of the container. These have a mass too, height and width. And then the other stems are predicated on that one. This one has to be cut correctly because everything else, it's like buttoning. If you got the top button wrong, all the others are wrong, right? Okay.
And Nancy, did you say something about in terms of placement of the kenzon, like depending on what season it is? I remember from the class, we said like if it's winter, you don't want the water showing so much. Is that, or did I dream that up?
Pat is asking about the placement of the pin frog relative to how much water then is revealed in a Moribana container. And certainly when the kenzon is in the back part of the container, as it is in this design, the water is visible. And we want it to be visible. In fact, the edge of the container, the line, this is part of our composition too. When the kenzon is pushed forward, then to the viewer, the water view there is mitigated. You don't see as much of it. So it's usually depending on the pattern that you're doing. But Pat asked specifically about seasonality, and Ikebana, being very sensitive to seasons, feels that in the summertime, it's refreshing to see the water in the container. But in the dead of winter, not so refreshing. So we might want our designs to be to the front to minimize the view of the cold water in the winter. Yes, I think that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
So you said change the water every day. Do you take the kenzon out with the whole decorations? And
Yes, it's actually easy when it's a Moribana. If I've placed these in here in a very stable manner, I can simply take it out and dump the water. When we use a tall container, which could have a design, it won't have a pin frog, that's a little more difficult. And I usually use a siphon tube for that. It's easy enough to do. Just remember though, that when your vase with all the heavy materials in it no longer has any water because you siphoned it all out, now it's top heavy. So sometimes it's good to have somebody there to hang on to it.
And also follow up, but is it when you were bending some things after it's already in the kenzon, bending it, is that mainly for the wooden or firm ones? Can you do that with flowers when they break it?
Bending is an art in and of itself, and it's learned through breaking a lot of things. Yeah, as an Ikebana student. But bending is really important to help shape the materials. There are some materials that absolutely defy bending. Japanese maple comes to mind. You're not going to bend that without breaking it no matter what. So you better just do a different pattern and use it the way nature wants it to be, or use a different material. But we bend a lot of material. You may have noticed I bent the Veronica, which have a straight nose, but it obeys very nicely and it stays. Some things won't stay, but you learn from working over and over and over and over with materials, which ones are going to break, which ones are going to obey, which ones will be happy when you bend and which ones won't.
More.
Yes.
About how long, I mean, people are working together, how long do they last? Do you have to fix your flowers and foliage to make sure it lasts longer? Or you just last for?
She's asking, the question is, how long do the materials last? Yes, well, it depends on the materials. Certainly some things last longer than others. Two floral materials that are outstanding in their base life are chrysanthemums and carnations. You can't beat those two. They're a great value. The other thing that there is one other material that defies those two, and that is anthurium. They last and last and last and last and last. They may be expensive, but they're well worth what you get out of them. Other materials, you learn, again, this is something you learn from working with them over and over. Some materials are very subject to drying out, so you may have done some special technique to them to make sure they're really, really hydrated before you put them into a design. You can see in a Moribana container that the water is only about this deep. So it's important that the water level then is kept up to the top as high as possible. It helps the PSI, pounds per square inch, helps push the water up into the stems. So that's important. Don't put them in a sunny window. Don't put them near a heat register or a source of heat, obviously. And just know that some materials aren't going to last very long. And when you design with those, sometimes it's good to have some extras so that you can swap out something that didn't last as long. Branch materials drink a lot of water. So very important to keep adequate water delivery when you have an arrangement with branches in it. Did I answer your question? Yes. Any other questions?
There's another one on.
Online, can you please repeat the calculation of the container's mass relative to the stems? Certainly, I'll be happy to. Can everybody see this? I don't know whether the camera can see it or not, but
You know what, we can-
well, it's easier to do it right here, I think, on this diagram. The designer needs to know what the mass of his container, his or her container. And we determine the mass by measuring the width of the container and adding to that the height of the container. Width plus height together, what does that add up to? And in a container like this, it's about 12 inches across and about 2 inches high, and then we double that. If you have a container that's shaped like, looking around for another container, say you have a container shaped like this. Yeah. Width, which is much less than that, but the height is a great deal higher. You still add the two of them up, and that is the mass of your container, and then times 1.5, or sometimes times 2. And if you go to a different school, they may have a slightly different elevator, if you will. It's always the mass, but then how much do you add on to it? Is it 1.5? Is it 2? Is it 1 3/4? Different schools have a slightly different aesthetic approach to it. I hope I answered the question for our Zoom audience. Any more questions from the Zoom people? Any more from this audience? Yes, one more question.
To use dead material, like I find you see in the big branches.
Can you take your mask on just for a moment? I'm having a hard time hearing you. What?
Can you use big branches that are dead?
That are branches that are dead, I think is that it, yeah.
Oh, branches that are dead. Branches that are dead can be used, but you should combine them with something that's live. Again, the spirit of Ikebana is live material. So even though we may use a dead branch, we would just use it simply because it's dead. We would be using it because it's beautiful. Somehow, like driftwood, or it's a very forked and dried branch from your apple tree, or something like that. But an arrangement made just with dried materials, even if you compose it according to Ikebana principles, it's not really Ikebana because it's dead. The whole thing is dead, yeah? So use your dried materials, your dead branch, for its beauty, and then combine it with living materials. Did that answer your question? Any other questions? Any more here? Oh, yeah, this is a great question. Online, do rocks or stones have a place in Ikebana? Unequivocally, yes, rocks and stones very much. In fact, all things from nature have a role in Ikebana. Rocks or stones often are used inside of a Moribana container to either help conceal the pin frog, make a pattern with the pebbles in the bottom of the water, any number of things. So yes, however, the rocks and or stones are secondary to the floral arrangement itself. They should not outshine. They should not be competitive in their own size, scale, beauty, coloration. They should be, they're not the main star. Any other questions from the Zoom audience? I think we're about to wrap up. So if you have a question and you're online, ask it quick.
Did you want those or?
Oh, Pat is asking me, do I want these materials? And no, if there's something here that you would like, you can take materials from these. Oh, yeah,
Take it out and then. yeah.
okay. All right, is that it?
Thank you so much for.
Thank you for your good questions.
Comments. In a few days, you're going to get an email link to this presentation. And also for the people on Zoom, an evaluation form. So if you could fill that out and return it to us, we would appreciate it. Please join us for future seminars and workshops. On December 4th, we're having our annual wreath making workshop. So if you're interested, go to our website and you can sign up. We're going to have a limited number of people on site, and then other people will participate through Zoom. So if you're interested, thanks again, Nancy. It was a great presentation. I'm sure everybody. And thank you to Kevin Wilkinson, our Zoom technical specialist, without whom we wouldn't be able to do this. Okay, thank you for coming. Thank you.